CEOs say that availability of critical skills is amongst the biggest issues that's out there in the market today. And next only to that is, do we have right kind of talent available within the organization? So no more is talent acquisition about going out and hiring the right talent from outside, but it's also about how do we how do we first hire the right kind of leaders and how do we grow them within? How do we make people relevant to kind of, becoming CXOs in our organization? And that's the big opportunity out there that companies need to address to be successful out there in the market. And this is, literally one was to say, what's the paradox is, as a country, we are one which with abundant business opportunities, but our people working in organizations saying that from a career perspective, there just isn't enough from a growth perspective. So that's the first paradox. It's abundant business opportunities, but limited career opportunities. The second is which people get puzzled about, a country like ours with, large size, large infrastructure on the academic side, but a very, very small talent pool. Like I said, who comes out, who is employable, are right kind of skills being taught, is the right kind of partnership happening between colleges and academic institutions, and is the right kind of talent available out there to work. And that's the reason that is literally leading to, what we call as paradox 3, which is low-cost country, but increasingly expensive workforce. It's the ecosystem from which companies hire is just within themselves. The pie doesn't seem to be growing. And the kind of pressure that puts on salaries literally of, 10 to 12% average hikes across years. And how long is this sustainable? And, will India retain the edge that it has because, of being very, very competitive on salaries? And that's the other big challenge that companies out there need to address and work through. So, just taking you through, we've done a hiring research about a year back now, about 8 to 10 months back, and looking at in that, if that's the context of what's really happening out there in the market, what are some of those challenges that talent acquisition teams face in India? What do they need to do to be able to position their organizations and their companies right? In many ways, I think the job of a talent acquisition leader or a manager is exactly the same that a brand manager has to the product that he or she has. How do you position the company to be able to, go out and get the right kind of talent to come and work for you? So increasingly, social media spending is increasing. No more can you not be out there seen in right places, which is either LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or some of the other platforms to be able to build your brand out. We were actually speaking some time back about Glassdoor and the kind of impact it literally has in terms of, building a brand and being seen the right way in terms of, as an organization that you are. So, increasingly companies are going out there and spending more on social media, trying to control what's out there for themselves, pushing the right messages out, and that's very, very important. In the same context, the amount of effort you put in for building your employer brand. As much as companies are out there going out and saying, what does it take to attract the right kind of customers? In many ways, I think best-in-class organizations are saying that's exactly the kind of focus and effort we need to build an employer brand for ourselves. We don't want everyone to come and work for us, but we need to be very clear about what does it take to come and work for our organization. In that context, have we defined those standards that people need to pass through, or are we able to attract the right kind of people to come and work for us? I think that's the other piece that we're beginning to see a fair amount of investment in over last many, many years. The other thing is technology and data. Now, data is available literally, whether you do work around compensation, whether you do work around performance management, when you go out and hire and what you do with data available. So big data is becoming another thing in terms of, how do you take that data and voluminous amount of that data and kind of bring some science and some, drive it, you use the data to drive insights in terms of, who fits your culture, who fits your, performance standards better, how do you drive better training, who do you need to invest in to be able to get better returns. So big investment in big data and technology is the other big thing that's kind of happening out there in the market. The other thing is, how do you build pipeline from within, especially at senior levels? How do you make your organization, everyone literally wants to be the levers of the world in terms of how they've built talent from within. So how do you kind of build your talent systems, talent programs? How do you build a leadership pipeline that actually helps you, have your next CFO, next CHRO, next sales head, next marketing head from within the system? And there's enough research to say the talent that comes in from within is likely to be is likely to be faster when it comes to being able to perform and be more successful. So there's disproportionate investment that's happening around, building talent from within. The other is around, and that's a new stuff that we saw last year, which is around going mobile. That, how do you take your talent systems mobile? How do you take performance? How do you take learning? How do you take talent acquisition mobile? How do you do your assessments on the hand phone? You know, if we're seeing e-commerce companies literally shut down websites and go mobile, in that same context, can you take your talent strategy and kind of put it into an infrastructure or a process that helps you take it mobile, helps you increase reach? So those were some of those things or challenges that TA teams and HR teams are facing out there in the market.
I think it's pretty clear, that the talent is pretty much one. I don't think there is any debate on that. And if you look at the talent landscape today, whether you are talking about startups or you're talking about large companies like us, it's always going to be vying for the top talent. And India is a very interesting place, where every year, like you called out, every year we have lakhs of graduates, engineering graduates passing out. But if you look at really the talent, then the talent is still very small percentage, which we all vie for. So how do you really make sure that you are going for the top talent, having the right talent acquisition strategies, having a compelling brand around it, and really inspiring your brand to attract talent I think is a big challenge for all the companies today. So in my mind, there's no doubt that we are in an era, and I think the way India is growing, like you were talking about 7 to 8% kind of a growth, I think the competition is just going to increase from now. I mean, I don't see any pause happening there. It's a very, very competitive industry we are, whether we are in technology, whether in FMCG. Wherever you go, the top talent is always very hard to find.
Yeah, no, thanks. So, Riti, what your context? You're in an industry that today is literally flanked by many startups in many ways.
Right.
And the space is hottest out there in terms of, what's really happening, very different ways that startups are going out, hiring and kind of retaining talent. So what's your experience? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I do agree that, there is, the war for talent is increasing, by the day. In fact, earlier we were just, trying to hire people locally. Now we are trying to hire globally, and the niche talent is very, very scarce, and I've seen that one thing that is going to, even be more difficult in future is that if you know that the talent is there, it is very, very difficult for us to, attract, because it's not just the skill sets, it's also the culture fitment that is very, very difficult to get.
Absolutely.
So most companies are able to find the skill sets, but they're not able to find people who are like fitting into the culture. So I think it will get even more difficult, and just like an employer chooses an employee, an employee also chooses an employer, and that's why it becomes all the more difficult to attract, to retain, as well as grow the people internally. So I think companies will have to come in with a lot of innovative approach as to how do you attract this kind of a talent, how do you retain them, how do you grow them, and at the end of the day, they have to have a value proposition for joining a company.
Sure. No, it's interesting you say that, because maybe Uma, I should come to you, because in, a lot of this speak about war for talent. I think we speak about technology and e-commerce and startup ecosystem, and we tend to miss sometimes the brick and mortar setup. So what's your take? How real is how competitive is the talent environment out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is equal when it compares with other industries. I don't know if it's a war, but certainly it's a hunt for for talent. And that's a big challenge that I think brick and mortar industries have. At a senior level, the challenge is relatively lesser, because people see the value of the role and the industry, because there's a huge amount that you can actually contribute in terms of growing the infrastructure space, for example, or growing in the nation building kind of industries and all that. There is definitely a challenge at the lower levels, the entry levels and the mid levels, where the population has to be technically trained to be able to take those positions. And from what we see in the trend in among the students, fewer people probably opt for some of the domains like mechanical, etc., in engineering. And then even if they do, eventually they would probably prefer to join a services sector with their domain knowledge, and that's where sometimes we do get stumped in terms of finding the right kind of talent. So you have to be very creative to sort of stratify your organization at different levels to understand what is the kind of talent required. So, every position at the lower level need not be in a full-fledged engineer. So, for example, we do look for the diploma engineer trainees Then it goes to the level of graduate engineers, and then of course the MBA students, etc. So I think there's a sharper, work in terms of how you stratify the organization and look at the right places for the right kind of a talent. It's not just one size fits all when it comes to talent.
Sure. So Mohan, what about, we've heard both Vikram and Deepti speak about being able to position your company right, to be able to hire. So what's your take on employer branding? Are our companies doing enough to be able to position their employer brands out there in the market in a manner that helps them actually get the right kind of people? So in one way it tallies to Deepti's point about culture, that your brand also reflects who you are, and hence it attracts some kind of people and some doesn't. But are companies doing enough to be able to out there position themselves well?
Especially in the Indian context, I don't know whether we as enterprises together made a significant effort to position ourselves as an employer brand. Rather, we positioning ourselves as a service brand, as a product brand in the market. That's how a lot of citizens knows the company about. Yes, there is a huge space which we need to cover to position ourselves into the as an employer of choice. While there is a lot of effort has been there on the ground. At a lateral talent level, yes, there are quite a good amount of talent knows and moves across basis the employer brand value. But at an entry level, the student community is pretty confused as of today because of our current social strata and changing social ecosystem is also confusing everyone what they wanted to choose. Going back to what Uma said, for example, 90% of engineers today join BPO, and the career aspiration is to change in next 12 months to 18 months, not to have next 15 years of career life, career defined. Doesn't want to stick to a particular place and don't want to have that kind of stickiness. There's a lot of social status changing. So from an employer brand value point, I think we'll have to strike that chord with the changing demographics of the Indian content.
Because what's your take on this about employer brand in terms of what's really happening out there in the market?
I think I'll give you a combined answer between the first question and the second question. So just on the first question itself, the way I look at it, especially in our business, so as much as we need to recruit for the professional services which we offer to the marketplace, we also have to see what clients' worlds are at any given point in time. And if I look at just this panel here and think about it, and some of you could be our clients too in different ways. If I look at, Gaurav's organization, which is talking about holographic images. If I look at Deepti and talk about a drone-based delivery of products. If I think about Mohan and talk about his BPO business, but it's all getting very, very mechanical. So you have kind of recordings, recorded messages, and IVRs, and which take care of it. Or if I think about Uma and think about manufacturing as a setup, which is turning a lot more robotic. So if the world of business itself is undergoing such a huge transformation, it puts an equal amount of challenge on not just the acquisition organization, but an overall organization to change and gear up for that. It further complicates with professional services world like ours, where we just don't need to be equipped with those skill sets, but we should have experts on board to guide those organizations in that particular direction. So in that context, if I think about employer brand, I think our brand is the work itself. And I think that's what attracts people. Our brand is about our own people, of what they kind of convey about our work to the marketplace. And last but not the least, are you communicating what you really do? So how authentic are you in terms of communicating what you're looking for? So my bottom line answer to your question, is employer brand important? Extremely important in today's context when everything is out there in open. Whatever you speak, whatever you write, whatever you convey in any which way, there is a possibility that all of that can go out in open and people can talk about it. So brand is important, having a coherent message about what needs to be done is important. And above all, your own employees or your own professionals are the biggest ambassador of you. So extremely important.
Sure. No, thank you. Anything, Deepti, Vikram, that you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think very rightly put, we do so much to put a brand which is next to the product, and we do a lot of companies do a lot to brand the external with the external word. But there is a shift that I'm seeing that now companies are wanting to brand internally also with their employees. I think that was not the focus. It was always, externally for customers, for products, and also what value proposition you have for the people who are wanting to join. But I think people have realized and companies have realized that the only way to brand externally is to do the right thing for the employees, and they'll be the spokesperson outside, and that's what most of the brand stands for.
Sure. And I can see what you're saying, because many years back, a lot of companies would go out and say the differentiator for them literally was what they paid.
Yeah.
So there's a company that paid X and the company that paid 10% more than X, another one that paid 20% more than X. But I've always told clients that it's competition in many ways is like a rat race that nobody wins. You have to have something else that differentiates you out there in the market and gets you to kind of be a little bit more edgier or just seen or visible, that kind of gets you the right kind of people. So Vikram, anything that you want to share on this, because
No, I think
both you and Deepti are frontline in terms of from a talent perspective, and your kind of places that you visit, campuses and programs, sometimes people have higher expectations from organizations like yours in that sense.
Yeah, I think I'll enough have said about brand, and I would agree with the panel overall. Employer brand plays a huge role in terms of attracting the right sort of people, both from industry as well as campus. And I think we at Microsoft, we do a lot of focus on that. Like, for example, we're talking about campuses, right? We run a lot of these engagement programs with our campuses. For example, we have a program called Acad Accelerator, which is really about touching students and academia and having influence on their curriculum as well. Right? So I think there are various means for you to have an impact, I think if you have to really differentiate yourself, because if you're talking about the companies, like I think pretty much all of us, right? It's not about just great benefits. It's not about just having a great environment to work with. It's also about how are you positioning yourself compared to the other company which are in your kind of league. And I know there are a bunch of the surveys. They're a great place to work, and the Randstad, a bunch of them. And that's obviously you want to be at the top of the stack. But apart from that, when somebody talks about your brand, how do people what people think about when they think about the company? I think that's very important, and I feel that students community plays a huge role out there, because they are the ones who are very well connected, and they are the most networked folks, I would say, whether it's on the social media and whatnot. So how are you being perceived at that? The community plays a huge role in terms of how your brand is being perceived overall.
Sure. And that actually, you've kind of just got me on to the next question literally in that sense, and I'll start back with you. Many companies come back to us and say that what generations of today are asking for at work is simply not on, in terms of, it's very different. Expectations need to be kind of more realistic. How do you respond to that? Do you take that, or do you think it's real, unreal, or
no, I think it's pretty much real, right? We're talking about the millennials, pretty much, right? The Gen Y. And I feel the expectations of the millennials is very different from at least my generation, right? I mean, it was, in the old days, it was about great pay. And I think the paradigm is completely shifted. It's not only about compensation today. It's about, if I look at the millennials, when I talk about like Microsoft Development Center I lead, right? Almost 40 to 50% of the population we have in the campus, in the IDC per se, is the millennial population, right? So how do you really keep them motivated is a big challenge for HR and the business as well. And I think it's about really giving them a very innovative environment to work with, environment where you can take a risk, fail fast, environment where you can have a direct connection with the leadership, and I think having a environment which is really helping them to kind of ideate and build great products. So these are the kind of, I think, are the Uber level. At the grassroots level, which I think is more of a hygiene factor these days, is about, are you really having an environment where we can have your millennials having your, we call it the BYOD, bring your own devices, right? We can seamlessly connect with whatever you want to work on. Do you have a kind of environment where campus, which is exciting campus with great benefits, right? Do you have an environment, where people can really do what they want? And then we also have an environment where people kind of do what they want to do. There's a lot of flexible environment to work, do different roles, internally move around. I think these are the things which are really would excite the generation today, which I think is a differentiating factor for most of us.
Sure. Absolutely. Uma, what would your reaction be in a setup like yours? How much is expectations around millennials taken, or what's the take of a company like yours, or your personal take on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think as a generation, it's a different thought that runs in them, irrespective of the industry. And what we face in our industry is we've got plants which are far-flung away from the cities. There isn't any glamour in any of these locations. You have to really work on the shop floor in the shift for a long, long time. And your social life could be equal to nothing, except for the bunch of friends that you have around with whom you socialize over the weekends or stuff like that. Most of the times they run 24/7, so there's a weekly off and stuff like that. Now that's for the technical folks. When I look at the management grads, they come in for the sales roles, essentially the sales roles. They have to be again in remote areas. The products that we deal with are not all urban. We've got a lot of rural products, which means people have to go out there and slog in the market. I think and I see that the millennials don't mind doing that, provided you set a career path for them, okay? That's really important. If you kind of don't have that very clearly laid out, then it does not make them feel very kicked about getting into that area. So that's been a realization for us. So we hire at different levels. Where we've hired people into a next gen program that we call it. It's a general management program. People have flocked from the best of institutes to be a part of this. And they don't mind going through the grind for 2 years in different organizations in all kinds of roles, because they see the path very clearly towards the leadership role, which perhaps their colleagues, batchmates would not do it in a long time. When I go to the second tier of institutes there from where we hire, we're not able to give them that kind of a fast track career. And that's where we started getting real about the roles and the kind of people that we were putting into those roles. And I think all organizations who aim to do this have to get real about it. It's not about flocking to the campus and picking up people. It's about utilizing them right for the right roles. So there's a pressure that we're putting on our managers now to identify the right kind of roles where they'll be able to give them the kind of exposure. This is not the old school of thought anymore that for 10 years you're at the shop floor and then you get a career move upwards. It doesn't work like that anymore with this set of people. So that's been the realization, and I think we're amending ourselves to the need of the generation.
Sure, interesting.